Yes.
I do, yeah. How long do I have to wait?
As Fred said, you will be, in lieu of table topics, you will be asking questions of our debaters. And that will be Arnie and Carl, who will be presenting their concept, their ideas about the ethics of the impeachment of Donald Trump. You will be responsible as Toastmasters to listen carefully to what they say. So you are to let go of your personal morals regarding this issue, because morals and ethics, while sometimes looked at as synonyms, are certainly not. Morals are personal ideas that you have developed along the way of what is right and wrong. Ethics are what our general organized feeling is of our public, of our laws, of our rules. And in our country, the Bill of Rights is probably the ethical standard of what you should be considering regarding all of this. So you have before you a copy of the Bill of Rights. Now there's more rights, there's more amendments, correct, to the Constitution, am I right? Yes?
Yeah.
The top 10, our founding fathers decided to call the Bill of Rights. There was a big stink back in the day. You know, I'm a historian, in addition to the tap dancer, tapping historian, tapping my way across history. But when the Constitution was formatted, it wasn't approved. You had the Federalists who said, yes, let's go ahead with the Constitution, and you had the anti-Federalists who said, excuse me, the Constitution so far covers the government. Yea, it does not really cover the rights of the people. So they sat back, and it took them years to come up with a group of amendments, and there were 12 originally presented. 2 were ousted, and these were the top 10 that were called the Bill of Rights. The others are certainly important, but these are the most important. And for today, with the brevity really of this speech, use these as background in addition to what our learned debaters will be sharing with us about these issues. The other thing that might be of interest to you is I have asked our debaters to switch their actual moral sides.
It wasn't a question. Wasn't asking.
Regardless of whether that is moral or immoral, they accept it. So ethically, I'm spot on. They said okay. So the question is, I think Ms. Pelosi, Speaker of the House, is probably the person who we look at as the opposing party to Donald Trump, whether that's right or wrong. And in the middle I included, and I think that's important to remember, is us. From sea to shining sea, excluding Hawaii, so sorry. So sorry. It didn't come up. Not that it's not important and not that I don't love it. Leadership ethics. That's what we're going to be talking about, not personal ethics. There's different forms of ethics. Who knew? Well, now you will. There's different types of ethics. For instance, there's personal ethics where, let's say, Tatiana, whom I adore, let's just say I don't really like her very much. Let's just say that. And she doesn't like me very much either. But I have candy. And she really wants them. She's been eyeballing that for a bit. I brought that candy in the hopes that she would go ahead and really like my speech today. So it's kind of a bribe.
Can you bust it here?
Exactly. Exactly. So she may or she may not not like me better because I have candy. But I did bring it to bribe her and all of you, so it can be passed around, in an effort to win you over. Now that's personal ethics on a personal level where you may or may not be genuine. You may be genuine for this time period, for this meeting, and when I go home and she's not here and she's not judging me today, I don't care anymore. So that can be considered unethical or immoral, but it's ethical at the time. For instance, anybody ever hear the omerta of the mafia? The word omerta. Yes?
Of course.
Okay, omerta is the standard, the ethics of the mob. You break the omerta, the silence, the ethics. It's ethics. They have a whole scheme set up that you do not break their rules. You simply don't. If you do, you're out of here. Get out of here. Forget about it. But that's their set of ethics. Don't get me wrong. That is really their set of ethics. You break it, you lose your life, and nobody gives a hot dang about it. Not within their tribe, not within what they're doing. Other people do not find that ethical, do we?
Yeah.
We don't. However, thou shalt not kill. Except if we have to. Oops. Somebody breaks into my house, they have a gun or a knife, and I have a baby in the other room, and a shotgun, loaded. Am I going to use it? I hope so. Wow, that's a scary thing to even say. Thou shalt not kill. So, the greatest ethics, the greatest morals are iffy. So that's something we're going to be looking at today within this debate. What acts produce the most good and the least harm? That is what you should be looking at within this debate, within every debate. Does what you're doing, or saying, or thinking, or how you're behaving, is it producing the maximum amount of good and the least amount of harm? Because it could be one of those iffy gray things. What best serves all United States citizens and the country? What choice does that? Within the political ethics, you're not supposed to be thinking about what you do. You're not supposed to be, as a congressman or a senator, thinking about, well, when my grandkids do this, or when my daughter ignores Christmas and opens up presents early, which she did today, by the way. I'm not happy about that, but does that have anything to do with Mr. Trump? No, absolutely not. Those are my things. It's my personal stuff. I do not take that to Congress. If I were a congressperson, I do not take that to the Senate and say, he's bad because he opened Christmas on the wrong day. That's none of my business. That's none of my business.
The moderator was supposed to be impartial.
This is another reason it's important to keep your documents. You never know when you're going to need something. So every single one of you knows that Kyle has at least 1 or 2 copies of things that you might be abjectly horrified of. Now, is that ethical? Is that? It's certainly moral. I mean, nobody's naked so far.
Yeah.
But that's what I do. So I got to choose. I didn't ask permission to put, because we had these up. So against the impeachment of Donald Trump will be Arnie Buss. For the impeachment of Donald Trump will be Carl Thormeyer. They will be speaking for 3 to 4 minutes. I will be timing that. You will be listening. I gave you a sticky note. You don't have to use that. but you will be listening to what they say, and you will be jotting down those things that you wish to know. Clarify, because I want open-ended questions. So not a yes or a no, because you guys are great at no. Sure, yes, absolutely. And your question is nullified. And this is table topics. You want an open-ended question that will end with something like, could you elaborate on that? I noticed you said, I would like more information about Carl. When Arnie said, your face blanched, could you elaborate what happened at that moment? Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Yeah.
Good, okay. I am going to flip a coin. I believe Arnie is tails and Carl is heads. I arbitrarily decided that in a very ethical way. My husband and I said, who's going to be heads or tails? And that's what we did. So, who is heads?
I am.
Who is tails? That's to be ethically correct. Okay. Tatiana, you're going to look at this with me? In fact, you do it. Throw it up in the air and tell us what it is.
It didn't flip.
That didn't flip. You gotta flip.
Yeah, just throw it up and let it land. You can let it land on the paper. She's Ukraine, you know. Throw it up.
And on the foundation.
That's it.
Thumb.
Okay. It appears to be tails. Is that not correct?
Yeah.
Tails. It is. Does tails want to go first or second?
I'll go first.
Welcome to the podium. Lectern. Welcome to the lectern. If this was a big hall, it would be a podium. Welcome to the lectern. Arnie Buss, who is going to regale us against the impeachment of Donald Trump. Listen intently. He has 3 to 4 minutes to convince you that the impeachment is not a good thing. You are listening to this amazing individual who is a distinguished Toastmaster, a professor of acclaim, and a cameraman to boot, and many other things that we won't discuss because, well, you won't like him. Thank you so much.
First, I'm going to take issue with the context of the question because, in my view, ethics only applies to individual behavior, not group behavior. There's no such thing as a group or an organization when it comes to taking actions. They consist of people. And so, in this context, and the question is it ethical? Is the impeachment ethical? And I will demonstrate to you that it is not. Okay, a few principles to understand first. Ethics and legality can be completely separate. Something can be ethical, but illegal. Something can be legal, but unethical. And of course, things can be both. Now, when it comes to individual, there is no such thing as government. There are only people in the government. And so, to try to keep the spirit of which the question of is the impeachment ethical, I will address the individuals involved. And the individuals, well, of course, there's Trump himself. And there are the Democrats and the Republicans. And for them to break it down to an individual, I'll focus on the Intelligence Committee. And the individual was, on the Democratic side, was Adam Schiff, and on the Republican side was Devin Nunes. Now, take Trump, for example. It is a well-documented fact that he has committed acts which are both illegal and immoral, such as the Trump Foundation, in which he used money from that for his personal gain. But that's not what he's being impeached for. So that's irrelevant to this conversation. Now, before I proceed, the guiding document is actually the Constitution, because impeachment is not in the Bill of Rights. Impeachment is in the Constitution itself. So the first question is the impeachment legal? It is absolutely legal because it is embodied by the Constitution. The question is it ethical? and not is impeachment ethical, is this impeachment ethical? And I claim that this impeachment has a lot of unethical elements in it. Now, the first is that the body is not unified in this, so I don't think you can speak of the body performing an act, because on the one hand, the Democrats united in favor, the Republicans united against it. And the Republican, in the face of Nunes, has committed legal but unethical acts, because not only has he been coordinating with the White House, but he's actually involved with the whole Ukraine thing, as it turns out. But it's also a principle that just because somebody else does something unethical does not justify you doing something unethical. So the question is in the articles. And let's focus on the second article of impeachment, obstruction of Congress. Now, there aren't a lot of guidelines. The Constitution does not specify what that is. So all we have is precedents. And the only precedent we have is the impeachment of Bill Clinton. And in the impeachment of Bill Clinton, obstructing Congress was one of the articles against him, and the Senate acquitted him of that. And so if the Senate acquitted obstruction of the Congress, if that article is being brought up by Adam Schiff, himself a prosecutor, and not only a prosecutor who had previously involved with an impeachment of a federal judge, he knew very well that obstructing Congress was not a legitimate article, because the Senate had already decided that in the case of Bill Clinton. And so the fact that he knew that, and he chose to bring that article up anyway, was an unethical act. So that one thing makes the entire impeachment unethical. And in fact, as I think I've demonstrated, nobody involved with this has acted ethically. Madam Chair.
Calling to the lectern will be Carl Thormeyer, who claims he is a Harvard professor today and an expert on legal issues regarding the government. He also states that he was pretty much hornswoggled by a bunch of, could you turn that, oh, never mind. My bad. Could, no, he's fine.
Okay.
He states that he was hornswoggled into this by a group of women at a luncheon just last week. May we bring to the center stage Carl Thormeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Arnie, for your comments. I'm going to look at this whole issue of ethics and the impeachment proceedings in a historical format. We need to understand the history of what impeachment is all about before we really can make a decision as to whether or not it is ethical. And as Arnie pointed out, I think of ethics more as an individual thing. Am I doing the right thing? And if I'm doing the right thing, then I consider that I'm doing something that's ethical. And if I don't think I'm doing the right thing, then maybe I'm not being ethical. And I have to ask that question whenever I have to make a decision of something that's right or wrong. Now, as Arnie pointed out, the Constitution, big book, doesn't say very much at all about it. It simply says in Article, excuse me a second here, but in Article 2, Section 4, it says, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment, for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And elsewhere in the Constitution, it states that the House of Representatives are is the prosecutor, brings the charges, and then the Senate is the judge and the jury. And so the House brings the charges, as they have done in this case, which I feel is perfectly ethical to do, to bring charges. It's authorized by the Constitution. And now it will go to the Senate, and they'll be the judge and the jury as the House prosecutes. So the House has effectively done its job. Now, the question comes up, what do we mean by high crimes and misdemeanors? Well, President Gerald Ford once offered a famously cheeky explanation. An impeachable offense is whatever a majority of the House of Representatives considers it to be at a given moment in history. But not everybody agrees with that. There's a couple of issues, and Arnie touched on it a little bit, about crimes and misdemeanors and whether such things are impeachable. A crime may not be something that is impeachable. If I'm president and I go out and get a parking ticket, theoretically that's a crime. Is that worth impeaching me over? Probably not. Does it have anything to do with how I do my job as president? Probably not. And then you have, on the other hand, the issue of whether or not all crimes are impeachable. I guess that's pretty much what I touched on right now. But suppose that there is no crime. Can you impeach someone? Let's say a president decides he's had it. He says, I'm going to take 6 months off to a tropical island. The vice president's got it. Don't bother me. I'll call you. Don't call me. I'll call you. Is that a crime? No, it's not. But I'll bet you the Congress would impeach him because he's not there doing his job. So these are things that never have been resolved in court or by the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court actually has no authority to make a decision on impeachable offenses. So these are issues. Now, historically, when the framers of the Constitution tried to decide what to put about impeachment in the Constitution, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of different ideas, and one of the ideas, the suggestion was made that we would include maladministration. And that would mean mismanagement or ineffective governments. But James Madison argued that this would be too broad and that effectively the president would be serving at the pleasure of the Senate. If they didn't like something, then they'd impeach him and take him out, or her. So they battled over it, eventually came up with this high crimes and misdemeanors, which has stuck ever since the late 1700s. Now, basically, it's said by other legal scholars that these issues are offenses which proceed from the misconduct of public men, or in other words, from the abuse or violation of some public trust. And that was Alexander Hamilton who said that in 1788. Thank you. So over the centuries, it's been looked at in different ways depending on who was in Congress. And we go back to historical, there have only been really 4 instances of where a president was threatened with impeachment. In the case of Andrew Johnson, there was no crime. He simply was firing people that Congress didn't think he should fire, and so Congress tried to impeach him and came within 1 vote of the Senate of doing so. And then we had Richard Nixon, who technically wasn't impeached because it never got past the committee. He quit before that happened, but there were crimes here, and he, no doubt in my mind, he would have been impeached. And we can talk about the other 2 later because my time is up now. Moderator.
We will proceed with our debaters keeping their seats, and I will lead the first question to both participants, give you an example, and then I will choose from the group here. I understand that Arnie stated, and please correct me after I finish speaking, Arnie, that there wasn't another president to choose from regarding Congress and acts of war, and what you said something about that, about Congress and impeachment.
Yeah, just to clarify, the second article of impeachment had to do with obstruction of Congress.
Okay.
And was virtually identical both in the article and in what was done in Clinton's impeachment. And the result of that was that Clinton was acquitted of the very thing that Trump is being accused of.
Okay.
So the historical precedent
Okay.
means that it shouldn't have been brought up.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying for that, that for me. It is my understanding that regarding Congress, that a gentleman who was president, I believe number 16, Lincoln ordered the military blockade of southern ports without approval of Congress. Gentlemen, for this high crime or against Congress, should Abraham Lincoln have been impeached? Arnie?
I don't think so, because the context of that was during a rebellion
and it was during a war, so
The war had not yet taken place. It was not called.
I believe that Fort Sumter had been fired upon by that point.
No, sir, it had not. So with that idea, let's look at, for instance, Harry Truman. Harry Truman began the 1952 Korean War without requesting Congress.
The Korean War was actually a UN operation.
So it had nothing to do. Carl, same thing?
I agree with Arnie. First it was a police action. If you read about the Korean War in historical context, the word war never comes up. It's a police action. And as far as who started, that's subject to.
And it still hasn't ended.
And it's technically, it's still going on in truce.
Yeah.
Okay, but Truman was good on that, so we're not worried about that. Monique, could you please ask?
Yes, so Arnie, you said it was unethical for him to bring up this obstruction of justice, the Article 2. And Carl, you acknowledged that, but you kind of breezed right over it. Could you explain in a little bit more detail why you think it was ethical for them to bring up the Article 2 for the impeachment,
Well,
obstruction
in
of justice?
the history of the different instances in Congress where there have been impeachments, and there have been impeachments, I think it's 13 times since the Constitution came into effect. There were judges and others that were impeached by Congress. And what was the question again?
So,
Why is,
specifically that Arnie had said it was unethical for them to bring up to bring up the charge obstruction of justice when with Clinton's impeachment.
okay, I remember that.
Right, they
Sorry.
said that they proved that was something that wasn't good. That wasn't.
Historically, most of these 13 instances in the past have involved this very sort of thing. That somebody's obstructing Congress or obstructing justice. I think one of the charges against Nixon was obstruction of justice. One of the charges against Clinton was obstruction of justice. And it's basically just a cover-all, because what they're really after, the people that are trying to prosecute and have impeachment, the president or whoever has done something that to the majority of people in the House of Representatives is an egregious action or a series of egregious actions, and it's more about behavior than it is about obstruction. That's my. And from the standpoint of that, then I would say that would be an ethical way to go about it.
And I would say that if, well, in the case of a law, if there was an interpretation of a law that one judge decided one way, then it would be unethical for another judge to decide the same thing another way. So in this case, because, to piggyback on what Carl was saying, it's basically the House didn't like him. And so that's not really an impeachable offense in and of itself, but the fact that there is the precedent of it being acquitted, of Clinton being acquitted of this very specific thing, means that the unethical thing was because we don't like him, we're going to bring up this charge.
Think,
Am I
Tom,
allowed to elaborate at all?
let's move along, and we'll do that later if we have time. So keep that in mind. Tom?
I am wondering about well, first of all, I note that Captain Kirk succeeded in solving the Kobayashi Maru by changing the rules, right?
God
So
bless him.
this whole debate about ethics causes me to wonder, is that really the issue here? Wasn't Madison wrong in saying that you can't impeach for just not doing your job, on your argument that would just mean every president is serving at the mercy of the Congress, but isn't every president simply serving at the mercy of the Congress? They can always impeach, and they've done so now. So why isn't this, for example, then why wouldn't this be a Supreme Court issue? If it were really a legal issue and an ethical issue, shouldn't it go to the courts to decide? Instead it was left in the hands of Congress. So isn't it just an ethical, not a legal issue? In which case, the law has little to do with it. He is just serving at the pleasure of Congress.
And you're asking Carl?
Yeah, I'm asking Carl.
Now, I'll quote from an article that I actually came across in researching for this today. And it says, unlike other parts of the Constitution, there's no opportunity for the Supreme Court to interpret, quote, high crimes and misdemeanors and give a concrete definition. In the opinion of Erwin Chemerinsky, the Dean of the University of California, Berkeley School of Law, says, I'd say the one thing that is shown by past practice is it doesn't have to be a crime, it's about a serious abuse of power.
But, okay, but not at the pleasure. Something has to be proven, a serious abuse of
Not
power.
necessarily. And again, to quote, I forget, I guess it was Adam Schiff that, I can't remember if it was Adam Schiff or Jerry Nadler, but one of the two of them said, this isn't about Ukraine. This is about every bad thing that Trump's done for the last 4 years. I'm paraphrasing, but one of them said that. I can't remember which one off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you, Arnie.
I guess it was Schiff. I wrote down it was Schiff.
Well, what I believe the framers were after was an alternative to a monarchy, which is what the standard form of government was at the time. And in fact, some people were pushing for a monarch. What they came up with was this idea of separation of powers and checks and balances. And the question is then, okay, if you're going to have that, where are the different powers going to be and who's going to check whom? And in this particular case, they decided that it should be the House of Representatives and the Senate in particular who should be the check on the executive, which were all the federal officials. So I think it was a wise decision, in my opinion. I think it was ethical in that there were more people involved than just 9 justices. So there's much more, the will of the people is much more directly involved in the election of the Congress. And so it would more closely reflect the will of the people if there were such an impeachable offense. Just to respond a little bit to what Carl said, yeah, there have been many impeachments that have been brought, but only a handful have actually been convicted. And most of those have been cases where there was money involved.
Thank you. With a show of hands and only one vote, those who believe that Carl has proved his point for, again, this is based just upon this debate and no other issue. Did Carl prove, in your mind's eye, that the president should be impeached? Raise your hand if you believe that Carl proved that. And I am going to share the truth. I do believe you did.
Is somebody counting? I'm not.
I can see there's not very many, so it's put 4 of us. Okay, yes, and Arnie. Did Arnie prove for impeachment?
No.
It's against
Against.
impeachment.
Rather,
Yeah.
against. And again, you can withhold, so we have one person.
Yeah.
Wait, everybody's voting present.
And that's fair, so,
That's only 5 people though.
but that's okay,
Yeah.
because the others have decided to defer, or to absolutely
I don't think we
pull
had
a
a chance to vote. Can we call the vote again for Arnie? But I don't think, we got interrupted somehow.
Are we voting for Arnie, or are we just keeping our hands down and doing the Tulsi?
Well, you asked voting for. If I were to put a vote in, I might vote against both in terms of proving.
Okay, do you think these gentlemen proved, that Arnie proved his point?
Got one.
So that's 2. So I'm gonna look at this as
Precedent.
Precedent, right.
and as the other people are voting president, that this is a stalemate, except that Carl did win, but he didn't win a majority. So we're stuck in this place. I kind of like this, because this leaves us in the ethical framework of we're pretty much stuck where everybody else is.
Could I comment on something?
Yes,
You
yes.
said, you asked the question, how many believe that Carl convinced you that Donald Trump should be impeached? That wasn't the assignment you gave me. The assignment you gave me was, did I convince you that the impeachment of Donald Trump is ethical?
Okay, you're right. Okay, you're correct. I think we're still at the same place.
Can I vote for Carl?
I think that's a very different
That's a
question.
very different
I
question.
think-
Yeah.
I think you
Okay,
should
it's a very
please-
different quote than what he said. Was it ethical? Did he prove his point of, is the impeachment ethical? Raise your hand.
No, I took
1, 2, 3, we got 4, right? And Carl, you got 5? Are you with them?
I abstain.
He's abstaining.
I have a conflict of
And
interest.
did Arnie prove his point that it is not ethical?
You go with the precedent thing, with Clinton, like that. And hang on to that little nugget.
I end with passing out this ethical framework that I want you to enjoy over your holiday and argue with your relatives. Please pass that around.
Excellent.
And develop your own question, your own whatever, and enjoy the holidays with peace and quiet and love, and keep it ethical, and keep it loving. And there you go. Ethical forensic mocks, do not mock, slander, or threaten fellow Americans with differing views on Facebook, please. That's my last thing. Now, applause.